Wonder, 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 wonder.
Hey, welcome back to the Senora Vibes podcast. And for season 14, we are talking business, we're talking lifestyle, we're talking travel, we're talking all things women 40 plus, all the stuff that you want to know, the things that you are wondering, the things that you're thinking about. If you're a woman 40 plus, by the way, I am 49. I will be 50 this year in July. So I am in full planning mode and I'm super, super excited because I have a lot of really great stuff planned out. And not only am I traveling to my favorite places, I am going to be hosting a big party. Well, actually a few parties. I have a podcast anniversary party that I'm planning for year 5. There's just a lot of really good stuff that's coming in the pipeline. And I definitely want you all to just be super aware of what's happening and all the stuff that's going on. So we are in the middle of season 14. It is year 5. I think we're now reaching episodes 180 episodes, maybe 181, maybe something like that. And today's guest is my husband, Rusk. Hey,
Hello,
baby.
thank you for the invitation again.
Babe, a lot of people are having podcasts on relationships,
Yeah.
but I don't know if that's something we want to do. What do you think?
Well, it depends. I mean, relationships is a broad topic. It's pretty general. I mean, we can probably speak on specific aspects of it from our experience.
We don't like giving advice on relationships. I know
Well,
that about us.
Yeah, well, I definitely don't because I think they're complex. I don't like giving advice in general unless somebody asks me for it because I think everyone's circumstances are different. But
Yeah.
if there are circumstances that can make sense to me, then I'll chime in if I'm asked to.
Right. No, I know. But I think a lot of people are always asking, like, hey, what does it take to get a relationship to be strong and to, reach a milestone like 20 years, 25 years, 30
Yeah.
years? The one thing about Rusk and I is that our parents have been married 50 years now.
Yeah.
I believe his parents have been married 50 now.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah, 1974.
Yep. So last year they turned 50, and my parents would have turned 50 years last year too if my mama had not died in 2023, because she was actually in the middle of planning her
50th.
big 50th party, because she did love a party. Even though she didn't act like it, she really loved a good party. And so she was in the middle of planning her 50th anniversary party before she passed away. Mama died of a chronic disease. She had cirrhosis of the liver, was diagnosed in 2018, and she lived with it for like about 5 years. So she suffered a good amount, and then she had an injury in September of 2023 and fell on her knee, and her liver just couldn't handle the reproduction of the cells, and she passed away October 31st, Halloween,
Halloween Day, yeah.
on 2023.
I think like 30 minutes before Halloween started, we got the first knock on the door.
Right, at my mom's house.
Yeah, because the lights were still on and we were kind of just spaced out, disconnected from what was happening on the outside world. And all of a sudden we get these kids knocking on the door, and so we had to turn the lights off.
I know, I think for like a few hours we forgot that it was Halloween.
Yeah, completely forgot that day. That whole afternoon, from the time your brother had called us, we were in the car on the way home.
Right.
From, I think it was an investment property, and we put him on speaker. And
We were at a speaking engagement, you and I.
That's for
for
St.
St.
Thomas. That's what it was,
Yeah.
right. And he had called us, and he was
Yeah.
he was crying, and then so we decided to make a U-turn and head up to go see your mom, and she was in the final hours.
That's right. She was in the final hours, and her breathing had gotten very labored. I think we really started to like time her breathing, and we noticed that she just...
It was like 20 seconds between breaths.
It was off.
Right.
It was off significantly. And so all of us got together, and we just, I think we told our dad to just go over to her and just tell her that she could go, that we were going to be okay. I think she was holding on for all 4 of us to be there, two boys and 2 girls.
Yep.
The baby's 35 years old, so her baby was always going to be her baby, even though he was 35 at the time. And my daddy was just somebody that just was able to just kind of let her go at that time. Anyways, I think today's episode, I really wanted to be about something that's like really relevant at the time right now. And the conversation that Rusk and I have all the time is, how we handle or how we deal or how we have the challenge of living with immigrant parents. So I think there's this thing out there that I think people will see our photos and they'll see our pictures on Instagram and they'll see your photo, and I think they just assume you're just kind of like a regular white guy. But Rusk is anything but regular white guy. I don't know how to say it in a better way, but he's anything but a regular white guy. Rusk's parents are immigrants too, so his parents are one half is Middle Eastern and one half is Czechoslovakian.
Yeah, so my father's Syrian and my mom's Czech. I was born in the Czech Republic, but I think most of your listeners probably already know that.
Yeah.
I was a few years old when I had come down here to the States and immigrated, and my father had actually spent one half of his formidable years in the Czech Republic. He wasn't until 1979, he was 42 years old.
Wow.
When he had immigrated to the States. So he was almost as old as I am now. I'm 47, so he was 5 years younger than me. So you can just imagine that, of how old he was, traveling to a very different part of the world, coming from Central Europe.
And how was he able to come over here?
So that's a cool story. My grandmother, from my mom's side, was actually born in 1917 in central Pennsylvania, in a small town between Pittsburgh and Philadelphia. And my great-grandparents, who obviously I didn't know, had come down here with the whole Ellis Island, I think the second wave, late 20th century. But I think Ellis Island was 1890s, I believe, the first round. And I don't think there was one after that. So when I say Ellis Island, I'm not saying that they're actually in a wave. I think they were just a residual flow of immigrants that were still coming.
It's interesting.
And they came here. That part of the story, I really don't know what brought them here, but that's exactly how we got here, is because my grandmother was born here. She was an American citizen. And that's how my parents were able to come here, because they had that big box checked off.
Right.
And so this is 1979. So I don't know I'm pretty sure the rules are very different today. And I don't know what the rules were back then. But I do know that her being born here was a huge plus. Another plus was, what's your talent? And my dad actually had an electrical engineering degree.
Yeah.
And he taught math at a university in Prague. So they saw talent in him from a career standpoint, and also they wanted to know how much money you had in your bank account. So in other words, they didn't want,
that's interesting.
This is, I think the minimum back then was $20,000, but my parents, I think, had $100,000 saved up in their bank account.
Okay.
So they were able to provide that proof. So I think those three components put them quickly on the list, expedited them to come over here. And I asked my mom recently how her sister took it that she moved, and she supported her. And I asked her, how did my grandmother take it that she moved? And she had told me that she was supportive of it for various reasons. But I always wanted to know why my aunt, my mom's sister, didn't come too, and they're very different people.
Okay, so her sister is very different from your mom.
And so I think that's the interesting part of the story, is that both of my parents, even my father, grew up in the height of communism in Central Europe, and literally in the midst of the peak of the Cold War in the 60s and 70s. And to come here to a country that's literally was at that time the bastion of prosperity, and where it was looked at and looked up to for hope for people that had less in this world.
Yeah.
I don't know if this country has that image as much as it did back then.
Yeah.
Probably doesn't. Because
I don't think so. Not right now.
Not right now for sure. And I think that a lot of the world is also caught up to us. So there's not that necessarily that rush as there was back then, because if you're living in the communism. So they had come down here because they just my dad didn't like the lifestyle, but more importantly the mentality of his own brethren from Syria. He was an atheist. Well, he is an atheist.
And he grew up in a Muslim.
He grew up in a Muslim family, right? And they were staunch believers Muslims in their faith. not fundamentalists, not like sectarian violence kind of people, but they were staunch.
They were
readers.
devout.
They were devout. And my dad, for some reason, and which I don't really know today, because he
won't tell us.
He lives up to the stereotype of that generation of not divulging much about their past and their background.
They're called the silent generation.
And that's, I think, the perfect moniker for that generation.
I think so,
they don't talk about it. But they have really cool stories because they've endured so much. Our generation has really lived a sheltered life.
Yes.
With a few economic downturns here and there. But to be able to survive the way they had to survive on the resources that they had.
Totally.
I think those stories are really cool, and I would wish that they would talk more about it.
But I think it's part of their nature.
Yeah.
It's silent. They don't really tell us. As much as we try to like pride and like get in there and try to give them, like, just ask all these questions, they don't answer. They don't answer our questions. I think, well, not her, him, your dad. I think it's very much the silent generation. It's before the boomer generation.
Yeah.
What was it called?
Well, it is a silent generation. That's exactly what they were called.
Yeah, but there was another name that they gave that generation before the boomers.
It's not the greatest generation.
Oh, it's not?
That was the boomers.
Oh, so he was okay.
Right.
All right.
Right. Well, the greatest generation was, you could probably
I think
make
your
that
dad
argument.
is kind of at the cusp.
Right, but I don't think the generation that he lived in, I don't think it was the reference of greatest generation. I think that's only applied to the United States.
Oh, okay.
Because of their sacrifice in World War II, right?
Okay.
And the Great Depression and the formation
Okay.
of the big government and stuff like that. So I don't think that really applied to them because they lived in a very different world, right? A fascist, communist, bipolar world between the two.
Right.
And a bicameral world between the two. And I don't know that much more about it, but I just do know that my father, the reason why he had come down here, my mom had, you could say, silent ambitions. She wasn't overt about it, but my mom always, and she's a Leo just like you, and she loves the limelight. She loves shoving this shit down other people's throats. Look at me. She likes the cameras on her. Even though she's a hardcore introvert, she's a hardcore introvert in a weird kind of.
But she's a showman in her own way.
She's a showwoman in her own way, right? And she likes promoting her kids. She likes promoting success. I drive a BMW i8, and she always tells me, make sure you park it out there in the front of the house so the neighbors can see it. I like to show off your success. She's all about that kind of shit. It gets a little annoying sometimes but she's not excessive about it.
But you grew up with one, now you married one.
I married one, yeah. You guys love the whole camera action on you guys, right?
Oh my goodness.
My dad and I are the complete opposite.
Which makes it really, really interesting that your mom and I, because here's the dichotomy. Here's the thing about two Leo women. Either they really like each other or they hate each other. Because we could be either super alike or we could be just like super like annoyed with each other.
Right.
And I think the thing about your mom is that we've always gravitated to each other. We've become like partners in life since the moment that I met her 27 years ago, 28 years ago, maybe now. When we met and we sort of became buddies and we kind of like saw each other and we kind of like communicated in an unspoken way, but we knew each other and we got each other, but we didn't talk about it. We didn't say anything. I think even like back in the day, just meeting your mom, she was such a quiet woman. She was so reserved, but man, she had such a power about her, such a feeling about her, such a presence about her that it could be intimidating. And a lot of people say that about me. Like they'll see me and they'll talk to me. They're like, you know what? Sometimes there was a point in time when I didn't want to talk to you. I didn't want to know about you because, you might have been intimidating. And that was your mom too.
Yes, she has a quiet presence to her, and she doesn't talk much, but when she does say something, it's very poignant and it sticks. And she has a funny sense of humor. I mean,
she really does.
She really does. I mean,
really great.
Yeah, straight to the point. She'll just make fun of something. I just remember the other day when my father was complaining about his grandkids not texting him or reach out to him every week, and she says, "I guess we need a robocall. set up a robocall." It's like, go ahead. Every Friday, she was telling her grandkids, set up a robocall to text your grandfather.
I love that about her. I love that about her so much.
Set up an automatic text. Hey, Grandpa, how you doing? But don't actually send the text to set it up, just to check in on it. She makes fun of him that way. It's like, come on, they don't need to check in on you all the time.
Yeah. But I think that's why you and I connected so well, because you and I were both raised by very practical, very efficient driven women.
Right.
Like waste was nonsense to them. They saw things in a bigger picture. They saw things in terms of like, gosh, efficiency, ease, like the most easy to go, easiest to come to, easiest to go to. They did not suffer fools. I think one thing about your mom and my mom was like they captured people very quickly.
Right.
Your mom says it's called cool waters, and she says it's like very cool underground, but it's kind of like at the surface. And so what she says is that people are sort of at the surface and they're kind of paying attention to things at the surface, but the cool waters is like they're in the underground, in the inside, in the bottom of the ocean. Like stuff is going on, like there's all kinds of stuff going on, but at the surface it's very calm and very cool. And I think that's our moms. Like I think that's why you and I connected so well, and why we're, as children of immigrants, we connected so much. Because people will say, what do you guys have in common? Because we really don't have that much in common. We were raised by very different parents, but we were raised by immigrant parents. And I think that's what gave us the commonality, right?
No, it's we had the same value set. That's I think was one of the reasons why we connected from the beginning. Was I think you originally thought that I was the typical white guy, and once you started realizing that I had the same immigrant values as you did, I think you warmed up to me a lot faster.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
You had brought up the subject at the beginning when you asked, what makes relationships.
Yeah, what makes relationships work or connect.
Mm-hmm. And you had mentioned that I think one of the things is, besides, communication, hard work, flexibility, and values, I think, a lot of it's also luck too. Sometimes you just get lucky with the right person.
Yeah. But you know what, babe? I think a lot of people don't say like luck plays a part. They're always like, no, luck doesn't have anything. I think luck plays a huge part in everything that happens.
Yeah, and luck counts.
A lot.
Yeah, it counts a lot, I think.
There's like, no, you don't get lucky. You're prepared. You get, you prepare. You get everything. You get your ducks in order. No, luck still plays a part.
No, it plays a huge part. And,
huge.
And I don't think things happen for a reason. I think things happen because you get lucky. I think sometimes things are just, a situation is just fortuitous, and you just happen to be at the right place at the right time. I don't think there's anything that is micromanaging that particular situation.
Yeah, so I think the conversation today, I want us to go back to like some of the challenges that we face as we're children of immigrants. One of the things that I think we face, and we faced this 25 years ago, and even today in 2025, and when we met in 1998 and we got married in 2000, is the expectations of us being the perfect kids, being the perfect children, exceeding the expectations.
It is. It's. I can't speak to the experience of non-immigrant kids. I can only mention what I've heard from them.
It's just us, who we are.
It's just who we are as immigrants. It's definitely what it seems from what we understand is it's definitely much more difficult to be kids of immigrant parents. And what happens is there's a dichotomy between the cultural values that they bring from the old world into the new world.
Right.
And then as the kids grow up in the new world and assimilate to the new world, the parents typically don't assimilate at all or don't assimilate as fast.
Yeah.
And what that does occasionally is creates or leads to a rift in a relationship. And I think that's where the challenge eventually becomes, is that the parents that know how to adjust, the immigrant parents know how to adjust or acclimate or assimilate to the new world from where they come from are typically the parents that have a more successful relationship with their kids or better happiness. And I think the parents that want to bring their upbringing, their environmental, their cultural nuances and bring it to the new world and think they can apply it, because I think they misconstrue freedom. I think they come here and they think this is a melting pot of a country, which it is. But what that means is that you're supposed to assimilate to the overall theme of the country.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean that you can spread your wares from where you had come from on an overt level. You can keep it on a nuance or
In a covert level.
in a covert
Yeah.
level, but in an overt level to think that it's okay, for example, for you to have a barter-like mentality, which is, I'm speaking from experience from my father.
From the Middle Eastern side.
From the Middle Eastern side. These guys in this part of the world, all they think about is barter, negotiate, and on top of that, they think that's how this world runs all over the place. And it's not win or lose like it is in their part of the world. We try to think of things as win-win down here in the United States. And I think where my father sometimes, his mentality goes awry is that he brings that tribal mentality. And also they think of the world as a conspiracy. Everything is conspiratorial to them. And it's understandable. You know, they grow up in dictatorships. They grow up on autocratic regimes, and it's authoritarian, and everything is a lie. Everything they hear is a lie. It's literally fake news, and it's actual fake news. And it's propaganda. They live in a society of propaganda, so they think that that's here. And there's some of that, absolutely, but not to the extent what they're exposed to.
Yeah.
And then as your kid grows up here in this country and then realizes that's not what they're used to, they have a hard time accepting their parents' mentality. At least I'm speaking from personal experience, and I have a lot of risks with my father over the last 50 years.
Yeah.
Is because we constantly have to revere him, and it's a lot of reverence.
It's very patriarchal.
It's extremely patriarchal.
Extremely patriarchal.
Especially from the Middle East, and it's hard to do that when here it's an extremely individualistic society. We're hyper-individualist here, where you can kind of stand for yourself and speak for yourself, and it's all about you, what you want to do here. And good for you, good for me, fair enough. But there it's clan-based and it's tribal-based from the eastern half of the world.
Right.
And that's when I always have a rift with my dad, is because he has a hard time understanding our society here, because he thinks that because he played with matchsticks and those were his toys, that you need to expose your kids to the same parsimonious environment,
like very basic things.
But that's not to say that what his environment, his upbringing was wrong. It's just that's all they had. And you can't put your kids in a 3,000 square foot home with some luxuries in this world and then try to get them to be as exposed to the same saving cultural mentality. You try to instill it in them, you try to impart that to them, that they have to be good savers. But what is hard to do is you can't be as basic to the level that he had grown up with. And what I tried to explain to my father, before there was cars, there was horses. And when horses moved to cars, the agrarian world understood that the mobile world was not going to happen. And then as cars moved to jets, or as cars moved to the transportation of the technology that we have today, the kids can only be acclimated to what they know. It's hard to tell them 100 years ago that's how I used to do things. That's not the world today. World's moving and it's progressing. It takes a step back occasionally from time to time, but I think if you go back 2,000 years and you tell the people 2,000 years the conveniences and the luxuries we have today, medicine, science, technology, everybody's on board. Everybody would want to have what we have currently. And you go 1,000 years into the future, we humans of today will look at that future 1,000 years down the road and understand that we probably want those conveniences as well. So I think that's where the cultural dichotomy of the parents, they have a hard time as immigrants to accept that you can't raise your kids and you can't definitely raise your grandkids the way you were raised exactly 100%. Some of it, but you have to constantly make adjustments as time goes on.
Yes, of course.
The forces of the world that you can't control.
I think where we can definitely set some foundations is in terms of values, right? So in terms of values, and values are something that's very foundational and very strong to who you are. For example, the value that you and I always share because we were raised as both children of immigrants, my parents from Mexico, your parents from Europe, was the idea that your work ethic was your word, that your work ethic was everything to you. So growing up, as you get a job, you are beholden to your boss, and your boss is the word, and whatever happens, you live up to whatever your boss says. Or you're the employer, you have to live up to the idea that as the employer you set the standard, you set the tone for everybody. Because I think the one thing that we both realized as we were growing up is like, okay, we both had a really, really strong work ethic. And I think that's something that our parents, your parents instilled in you, and my parents instilled in me as a child of immigrants too, because I don't think anything ever happens for us unless we work our ass off for it. And I think that's just ingrained in us. Like, I don't think we ever got to any place high or anything that we wanted if we did not work like 60 hours a week, full days, full nights. Even when we had kids, we were working. Even when we were out of town, we were working. We were on the phone. We were doing whatever we needed to do. We didn't stop. We didn't put like this timeline. We didn't put boundaries. We didn't know what boundaries were. No. We were told that boundaries were insignificant. If you wanted to get somewhere, right, you did not have boundaries. You did not set timelines. And I think that's something that we still even do now, 25 years later, knowing what we know now, we still subscribe to that mentality, babe. We still subscribe to the idea that you still work through the night. You still get calls, in the middle of the night, early in the morning. We don't have timelines. We don't have boundaries. We don't tell people, oh, only call us from like 8 to 5. We don't do that. And I think that's all because our parents instilled that sort of all productivity all the time, every day, all day.
Yeah, no,
forever.
That's 100% accurate. And there was the word.
But that's kind of hustle culture, and hustle culture is kind of going out.
It is hustle culture, but
yeah.
it's 100% accurate. The word lazy was not in the vernacular of our parents, and waking up at 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning was not in the vernacular of our parents.
Neither one of us,
right?
yeah.
I mean, we were told to wake up at 6 o'clock the latest, and that's still ingrained in me today. And it's ingrained.
Is that something that's just a Gen X generation, or is it something that
I just
is
think
immigrant?
It's immigrant, and I think as generations go by, I think some of those values get diluted. Mm-hmm. Because if you read into the histories of the immigrants that had come before our parents, all the values get diluted over time because people adjust to the times. People adjust to the society that they're part of. I can imagine people from the 1700s will look at the world in the 1900s and find a lot of flaws in it, and probably a lot of positive benefits as well. And I think the people that succeed, what I had heard one time from a lady that lived to 114 years old, they'd ask her, what's the success in life? She said, learn to adapt to change. And because if you live that long, you're going to see a lot of change.
Right.
And regardless of which century you lived in, especially if you lived in the 20th century. Mm-hmm. So I think that's what her, and I think that was great. It wasn't dieting. It wasn't eat healthy. It wasn't exercise. Those are all givens. Those are all obvious things.
It was more mindset.
It was more mindset. She goes, I lived through the Depression. I lived through the World Wars. I lived through the nuclear age. I lived through a lot of economic calamities. And the thing is that you always have to have a backup plan, she said, and you have to be ready for change. And when a change comes, you have to be able to adapt
to change.
And I think that's what's dying in the generation today, or the generations that succeeds, is they have a hard time adapting to change. Because, and it's too soon to tell. A lot of this stuff is eventually studied and analyzed after the fact. We're only going based on the information that we have now. But I think that the thick skin mentality is not there anymore. But it's too soon to tell. And I think what parents instilled in us is shit happens, shit hits the fan sometimes, and okay, get over it. What are you going to do? You got to shake it off and go back at it tomorrow morning.
Yeah, I don't think we're allowed to complain. I don't think we're allowed to complain. And I think these are some of the challenges in terms of like being children of immigrants. It's like we're not allowed to complain. If we even try to complain, it's like, well, what are you going to do to fix it? What are you going to do to work it out? Like, don't come to us with like you're whining. You're absolutely not allowed to whine. You can't whine to our boomer parents or older parents. Like they do not want to hear it. What are you doing? What are you doing to fix it? What are you doing to work it out? So as parents to Zoomers, because we have Zoomers, you and I have Zoomers, we have to really kind of change our mentality and change the way that we see things. Because we can't raise our kids like the way we were raised. They would never survive it. The way we were raised was like either you figure it out or you're like doomed. And there was no other way out around it. Absolutely. So the way that we raise our boys is like, okay, we have to figure out a way. How do we, as Gen X parents, raise these boys who are Zoomers, who are not necessarily equipped like we were?
They're not equipped. They don't have a thick skin. But you're still trying to instill those values in them, but without actually breaking their backbone. And the problem is
breaking their spirit.
Or their spirit. And the thing is that they don't have that spirit as thick as we had it.
Oh, for sure.
So it's hard to say.
Yeah, so I think that's a challenge that comes around in terms of like if we're the children and the expectations. I think the expectations are the hardest because we're constantly trying to achieve. I know for my mom, growing up with her, if you were not being productive, you were not being a valuable person.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that's something
that's another thing that
I have to
every day had to be a productive day.
Figure out.
Even if there were small victories.
Even if there were tiny victories, they were still victories.
They were still victories. And every day you had to move towards a goal or towards a plan, and if the plan was a long term, you had to be doing something to be moving towards that. And that's still ingrained in us, today. That's what we get up every day, and you can't. It's a privilege to live what I had learned from my parents as immigrants and their stories, mostly what my mom has said about their time in communism. It's a privilege to live in the society that we live in. Mm-hmm. It's not a right. Even though we think it's a right, it's not a right.
No, it's a privilege.
It's a privilege. And to take, Margaret Thatcher had also said that too back during her time as Prime Minister in the 1980s. And you have to pay for that privilege. And then you also have to honor that privilege by doing your part. Because a lot of the part of the world doesn't have the options or the conveniences or the luxuries that we have here. So you should definitely do your part, contribute to society, be a valuable member, be a good person. And that's what I had learned from my parents, from their stories. And that's why they eventually immigrated here, because they wanted a better life for their kids.
But babe, what are the struggles with being raised by parents who are immigrants? What are some of those struggles, some of those things that we really just have to fight through and like really reorganize ourselves and recalibrate how we function, because the way they see things is not how America is doing things. I think number one, individualism is a really big part, because I know for us that we were raised to be very community oriented. We were raised to look at the big picture in society. The way that the administration looks at things right now is very individualistic. It's very capitalistic. Although you yourself as a very capitalistic person, you still kind of see things in terms of like society and like what can you be contributing to society. For me, the way that I was raised was like, you go through life, you do the best that you can in your education, you grow in your education, you get more educated, you get a college degree, you pursue even a higher education. that leads you to more opportunities, more money, more things. But at the end of the day, I think that what we've realized now as almost 50-year-old individuals, that's not necessarily the end all be all, right, babe?
No, it's not the end all be all. It's
Are you still like a hardcore capitalist in the way that you see the world, but although you were raised by very communal parents?
I think I would probably say I'm more of a capitalist now than I was when I first adventured into the entrepreneurial world.
We're having to end it here. We just had a little bit of an emergency, but anyhow, the conversation will continue. Thank you for being a part of this. We had to end it abruptly. Some things just came up. We're parents of teenagers, so things always come up when teenagers are around. So anyhow, I hope that you like our episode. It is about immigrants. It is about the children of immigrants. And then if you have something to add to it, we would really freaking love to hear about it. We are super excited to just continue this conversation as it comes around. Please let us know what you think at Senora Vibes Podcast and at _Alicia E in Instagram. And so you can find us all over the place on TikTok, on Instagram, at the website www.aliciaelatasi.com. And I'm just super excited to have you on board. Thank you so much for being a part of this. Like I said, we had to finish this conversation abruptly just because, like I said, we have teenagers and things come up. And we had to just cut the conversation very, very short. But this conversation will continue. Thank you so much for being a part of this. I love you all so much. Bye.